The purpose of this video is to get you started with the use of the sudo system, sudo, okay, and its graphical user interface counterpart. So, as you know by now, the main focus of this first offering is to introduce you to Linux from the user perspective. It's like what we could like to call a power user perspective, meaning that you're supposed to just be more than an end user. You're supposed to know actually the available tools and know how to use them, recombine them together, etc. So it's not just simply about knowing how to log in on the system and open the text editor, gedit, or the file explorer. No, it's a little bit more than that. However, we try to maintain that perspective, which is we are not going to administrate this machine. So that puts you in the role of, for example, a web developer having to work on a Linux server, an application developer, etc. Now, sometimes, in order to explain to you how the Linux system operates, we are going to do little forays into system administrator land, into root access, into administrator access land. So to do that, you are going to need to know what sudo is all about. When you install your Ubuntu, the user that you have installed the system with, in my case Tux, which is the name of the Linux mascot, is actually automatically added to a list of sudoers, that is, users who are regular users most of the time, but are entitled to use the sudo command to perform tasks with privilege sometimes. So every time you want to do something that requires administrator privilege with your user account, you have to prefix it with the sudo command. For example, and I'm not going to go into the detail of how those tools work, but I'm just trying to illustrate a point here where we do not have access as a regular user to a file, but we are going to bypass that with sudo. So for example, if I try to list the passwords of my system, permission denied, of course. If I use sudo, I'm going to be prompted for my regular user password, just as a way to make sure that it's me using the terminal. Enter, and there you go. You can see here the content of that password. Now, if I do it again, I don't have to enter my password. There is a timeout period, okay? So if I use sudo a lot to do various things, I'm not going to have to enter my password every single command. There is a time window during which the password is kept and valid. And then when this times out, you have to enter your password again. So that avoids situation where you walk away from your terminal for, like, let's say, 15 minutes, and somebody might, use your terminal. Alright, so this is it pretty much for sudo, classic sudo. Now, sometimes you want to open a graphic text editor on, for example, a file here that is beyond your clearance pretty much. So you can retry all day long, you don't have access to the file, it's not going to work. Well, I want to open a graphical text editor. I don't want to work in my terminal, but at the same time I want to use sudo. So the best way to do so is to use gksudo, which is going to allow you to open, sorry about that, little typo here, gksudo, and then maybe if I say what kind of tool I want to use, that would be better. So gksudo, just like sudo, and then followed by the full command line you are going to use, you want to use with privilege, and there we go. You have now your gedit text editor, which is opening with privilege a file containing password information. Okay, so if you want, as you see, every time even if I use gedit on a simple text file, okay, every time I use a graphical user interface application and I launch it from a shell, the shell is going to wait patiently that this application terminates, there we go, before to give me another prompt to enter over command. Well, it makes sense when you use something like ls. Give me the list of the folder and files in my current directory. It's executed in a fraction of a second, then the prompt is there. When you use something that's going to take some time to execute, you might want to send it in the background. You do so by finishing the command with the ampersand symbol, and that tells pretty much the shell, execute gedit for me, but execute it in the background. And of course, I'm using the up and down arrows here, by the way, to navigate the shell history because I am lazy to retype always the same thing over and over. So I'm locating here the previous line in the history where I use gksudo, and my point is to illustrate that you can do a gksudo in the background as well. No problem. There we go. Alright. So that summarizes pretty much the basic use cases for sudo command, gksudo command, and that should actually allow you to do everything you have to do in the suffering that will require actually temporary privileges, temporary root privileges.